Good afternoon to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to today's tropical weather outlook for August 5th, 2026. Today is going to be yet another El Nino update, as El Nino continues to smash daily record temperatures set by other past historic El Nino events, which is making this year setting up to be a significant and historic El Nino event of its own, but I think we are all familiar with that by now. And new climate model data, which is released today, specifically the European seasonal model, only confirms that even further. We're going to go over all of that today. So, lots to talk about. Let's get started right away. As we first do, starting off with these El Nino updates, a look at the sea surface temperature anomalies across the globe, because on this global scale, you could really see the El Nino stick out here like a sore thumb, and this just continues to strengthen day over day, really. We've been at a rapid pace in warming of the entire Pacific since the spring, and it has not stopped since. And with what I'm about to show you today, it is not going to stop anytime soon. We have widespread anomalies here beginning to appear along the equatorial Pacific, as much as to many areas now here. There's a solid slither of 3 degrees Celsius beginning to show up, and even a solid slither of 4 degrees Celsius beginning to show up here along the equatorial Pacific. I mean, this is really incredible stuff, and this is now matching, if not reaching above and beyond, the most strongest El Ninos of the past several decades. And maybe this might be not just the strongest El Nino of the last several decades, but maybe the strongest El Nino of at least the last century when all is said and done. I mean, just look at how much heat we have here in the Pacific, and of course it is persistent as well throughout the tropical Pacific here too. And naturally, because of El Nino, global sea surface temperatures are really beginning to spike up everywhere. But interestingly enough too, we also see some warm sea surface temperature anomalies continuing to build here in the eastern Atlantic, and that's going to have its separate implications, especially when it comes to the Atlantic hurricane season, but we will talk about that more later. But very strong El Nino update, El Nino incoming. Well, this whole video is an update, and the European seasonal release today only hammers that point home even more. The latest update as of August, the forecast peak is now explicitly at 4 degrees Celsius according to the latest Euro. And just take a look at the last few months here. This is a graph of all of the European seasonal model runs going back to March. And you can just see how every single month we incrementally keep on increasing with the forecast here. And that just goes to show that the models are seemingly still catching up to the strengthening pace that we've been on with this El Nino. And once again, that just proves that this is a historic event, and when it's all said and done, this will absolutely smash the old record of the strongest El Nino we have seen ever. I mean, the forecast explicitly now calls for us hitting 4 degrees Celsius with the average Nino 3.4 sea surface temperature, and there's been no El Nino in recent history that has even gone close to hitting 4 degrees Celsius. Now, in reality, maybe you could say we might end up slightly under than that, but in the very least, we'll probably end up above 3 here, and maybe slightly less when you factor in the tri-monthly averages, because this graph is based on a monthly, plot scale. So it's a little bit different because the official El Nino strength is measured in tri-monthly periods. But still, either way, all the climate model data that is coming out now basically supports record strong intensity with this El Nino, and it's only helped furthered as well, or you can only believe it further by taking a look at the daily sea surface temperature anomalies here. We just continue to warm up. The latest daily sea surface temperature anomaly in the Nino 3.4, at least as of yesterday, we are now at 2.2 degrees Celsius, and this is with the relative index. The raw sea surface temperatures are even higher, but the relative index, we are already above 2 degrees Celsius, and quite incredible we've achieved that feat, and we are now just in early August. But take a look at this year, which is represented in the black line, compared to the last several strong El Ninos here. and obviously the one that's kind of on the bottom scale here is 2023. We are well ahead of 2023 right now. 2023 was a strong El Nino, but this year is entirely a completely different beast. But what is more astonishing is the fact that we are right now at the highest we've ever seen for the current daily SST, plots here. We're even above 1997 right now. So the question will be, can we maintain with these very, very strong record SSTs on a daily basis from here on out, especially given that the pace of warming has been consistent over the last few months. And if that continues, then we are definitely going to run ahead above 97 and, another very, very strong El Nino as well, 1982. It kind of almost seems as if we kind of ran into a little bit of a plateau in both of those years once we got to around August and September. So as long as we continue warming, I would not be shocked in the very least that we not only continue to push above 97 and these, other top tier El Ninos, but we stay above there and obviously have a record strong event this year. And taking a look at the subsurface anomalies right now, this is the latest graph as of July 30th. And this map here is a little bit, behind by a few days, but I think this still writes the point home as well. Part of the reason why we have, this incredible El Nino event here is just the amount of incredible heat that we have below the surface in the Pacific. And the fact that we are already seeing record SSTs above 2 degrees Celsius right now in the Nino 3.4 in early August, but we still have so much subsurface warmth left to be used up here. This is absolutely going to be fuel for us to probably continue strengthening with this El Nino and definitely reach, in the very least, well above 3 degrees Celsius, and maybe we even reach close to 4 degrees Celsius, like all of the models show. And even again, reaching above 3 would be incredible, but it is almost as if the heat supply right now in the Pacific is just endless. And, the more we continue to get very, very strong westerly wind bursts like we have been over the last few weeks, and hint right now, and I'll talk about this more in just a little bit, we will continue to get very strong, if not record-breaking, westerly wind bursts. This is only going to continue to help fuel more of these warm waters to reach the surface here and fan out across the skin surface of the Pacific here, and just help to continue to strengthen this incredible El Nino. And atmospherically, taking a look at the SOI right now, certainly we are going to continue to see El Nino strengthening here over the next few weeks, and definitely a very strong sign of El Nino continuing to strengthen right now. The SOI continues to remain very negative. The latest average is at negative 25.76 with the 30-day average, and the 90-day average is at negative 21.72. And I believe I saw not long ago that right now, or at least July, or at least some point in July, saw the lowest or strongest negative 30-day average for the SOI on record, even beating out a year like either 97 or 82. So bottom line, this just continues to fuel the daily records that we are breaking with this El Nino, and the SOI here in absolute, record territory, well into the negative 20s. And the reason why this is important, if you're not familiar with the SOI, by the way, is because the SOI index in and of itself is a measure of the pressure patterns in the Pacific. So not only are we measuring, the strength of the El Nino oceanically, but this is also telling us that atmospherically as well, we are very much in sync with the record strength of this El Nino, and that is important. And that tells me more than likely here we are absolutely coupled, and we are going to continue to see strengthening here more than likely from here on out. And I wouldn't be surprised if the SOI values here get even lower in the coming weeks. Maybe we might even hit, close to negative 30 with the average of the SOI. I mean, let's take a look at the daily contributions here. Have we seen daily values here below negative 30? Oh, yes, we have. In fact, in early July here, We even had daily SOI values as low as in the negative 40s. So, my goodness, this is just an incredible El Nino event that is shaping up right now. And it's going to continue. All of this is going to continue over the next few weeks. There's no end in sight. And just to write that point home here, here's a Ben Knoll tweet from yesterday. And he talked about yet another record-breaking westerly wind burst is possible during mid-August as the pulse of the Madden-Julian oscillation moves into the Pacific. This would give an already record-breaking El Nino another upward push. So in other words, strong westerly winds will continue, and as I described before, even more strengthening of the warm pool and even more surfacing of all this warm water here coming to the surface and only continuing to strengthen this El Nino event as well. And taking a look at the forecast here for the westerly winds over the next 2 weeks, it just continues. I mean, already before then, for the entire month of July here, we just had nonstop, very, very strong westerly winds throughout the entire Pacific here, especially focused right along the date line, which is where we typically see them. But going into early August, it only persists, and it once again gets even stronger, especially looks like, around August 10th to 15th, maybe we might even see another peak of a westerly wind burst here hit once again. And again, that's just only going to continue to help strengthen this El Nino even further. And as Ben Knoll mentioned, why is that happening? Well, because of the MJO. That's going to move into the Pacific and amplify once again over the next few weeks. And this extended GFS model run goes all the way out to early September. And just take a look at the MJO here. It literally stalls in the Pacific pretty much throughout the entire month of August into early September. And that's going to only help continue to strengthen and allow these westerly wind bursts to remain very strong, very persistently. But it's also going to mean lots of tropical activity to once again surge in the Pacific, especially the Western Pacific. And we will talk about that as well in just a little bit. But let's go back to the climate models here, because obviously we had more climate model data come out. At the beginning of the month, the CANSIPS and the CFS, the European came out today, and we still have models like the NMME to come out yet still. So probably at the end of the week, maybe Sunday, I'll do a video, another El Nino update this week, and we will go over all of the new climate models which have come out for the month of August. Although I think all of their outcomes are more than likely going to be predictable. I mean, just record strong El Nino here, and I think they're all showing that at this point, and there's no changing it, really. The ship has sailed for this El Nino to potentially fail, and maybe something would come along and kind of suppress this El Nino from really blossoming. We are well into, straight shot towards record territory right now. In fact, we are already there, and that's going to continue here over the next few months. Just taking a look at the CANSIPS, and I think I might even shown this before, but just continuous warmth here building in the Pacific. Likely till at least October or November, maybe pushing into December as well. And that's probably around the time we're going to see the peak of this El Nino. And I think, going back to the Euro forecast as well, looks like they also generally seem to agree on that. So maybe a November to December peak. And you saw that clip there, just a moment ago. Yes, lots of activity coming to the tropical Pacific. But again, we'll talk about that in just a second. But El Nino will continue to strengthen here, likely at least until later this fall. So even though we continue to break records with the daily sea surface temperatures right now, more is on the way. And then once we get to next year, eventually, this El Nino will more than likely begin to weaken, because as strong as an event that this is going to be, you just can't have these incredibly warm sea surface temperatures here be sustained along the equatorial Pacific, especially once we reach the peak of this El Nino and we exhaust enough of the warmth in the Pacific, enough of that warm pool that's in the subsurface of the Pacific. These incredibly warm sea surface temperatures will not be sustained, and they will come crashing down more than likely as we head into next year. And very shockingly, and we're not going to talk too deeply into this because this is very far out, but already by June, this El Nino is pretty much already gone here in the Pacific. And, it kind of seems incredible given given the magnitude of this event right now, but it is definitely very, very plausible. And it'll definitely have its impacts that we will talk about next year, especially when it comes to hurricane season. But again, that's just way too far out. But in the meantime, very, very strong El Nino coming. And here's the CFS as well, and just incredible anomalies here. I think that pretty much tops the scale, some of those anomalies that the CFS shows. Once again, it seems to peak right around November and December. And then obviously we see pretty steady and quick strengthening as we head into next year. But in the meantime, once again, very, very strong El Nino. In fact, record-breaking strong El Nino, very much, ongoing right now. And what is that going to do to tropical activity here in the Pacific? Well, definitely, it's going to make it very active. In fact, things are already quite active right now, especially in the Western Pacific. We have 3 systems we are monitoring. Typhoon Dolphin, which, yes, this storm is still going incredibly, especially if you remember Typhoon Dolphin from maybe, last week. This storm is still going right now, and it still has a few more days of it left, as this will head towards China and very likely make a very impactful landfall there. But we also have a new storm in the Pacific right now. We have Kuajira, maybe like Kujira or something like that. That is a new name storm that popped up in the Western Pacific. And then we have Invest 96W, which already seems to be labeled Monsoon Depression 96W here. And this is more than likely going to become yet another name system as well. And then the Eastern Pacific, too, is probably going to uptrend once again, or going to have another spike of activity. And if you saw that quick glimpse of the National Hurricane Center, yes, you saw that there are multiple areas of interest now in the Eastern Pacific. So nothing on the map here right now, but in probably just a matter of a week, we're probably going to look more like the Western Pacific is right now. Things are really going to ramp up here once again, activity-wise. But we'll talk about that once again in just a second. Here's a look at Typhoon Dolphin, though. And it is definitely not as impressive of a storm as it was, especially, about a week ago when it was knocking on the door of high-end Category 5 status. And I guess this might be a good thing wind-wise for China, but one thing you do notice is this is a much larger storm right now than it was, especially a few weeks ago. The wind field has dramatically expanded and is likely hundreds of miles wide. And we still have the eye here holding on. So it's not entirely impossible that this will still try to re-strengthen at times briefly here before it reaches China. But especially with these larger storms, even if they don't pack a punch as much in the wind aspect, the risk for storm surge and just generally more widespread impacts goes up. So that's something to not take lightly here with Dolphin. And again, very likely it's going to continue on off to the west here and probably make landfall in China once we get to what day are they forecasting here? August 8th, August 9th. So roughly this weekend. So this has at least 3 or 4, maybe 5 more days left in the tank of this. And it's probably going to continue to weaken steadily, or in the very least hold off in intensity. And the Joint Typhoon Warning Center here looks like it, weakens slightly, maybe down to a Category 1 typhoon by the time it reaches China. So at least this is not going to be a major strength storm. So again, that knocks down the wind potential a little bit, but the storm surge will still be an issue, no doubt about that. So do not write this storm off. And still, if you are in China or even Taiwan, you will want to take this storm seriously and pay close attention to the progress of Dolphin over the next few days. The Eastern Pacific, though, as I mentioned before, also going to get very active here. And I mean, again, just the entire Pacific is going to dramatically turn up here over the next few weeks. And especially the Eastern Pacific, you remember just about 1 or 2 days ago, we had a completely blank tropical weather bulletin, but favorable conditions are coming back to the Pacific once again, and it looks like we are about to see things, really take advantage of that. So we now have 3 areas of interest present right now, all 3 of them in the Eastern Pacific Basin, although we might have some development here closer towards the Central Pacific as well. But we have 3 areas of interest, and taking a look at some of the ensembles here, especially the long-range ensembles, some of them do look quite interesting, especially for Hawaii. I'm not sure if it's this storm in particular or if it's this AOI, well, not storm, because neither of them are, classified storms yet, but this AOI or this AOI, I'm not sure, but I do see that some of the long-range ensembles here do indicate some pretty, quite a bit of tracks aiming towards Hawaii. So, we're definitely going to have to watch the Pacific here very closely over the next few days. And then in the Atlantic, things are quiet right now, nothing being monitored by the National Hurricane Center, but maybe, just maybe, that might be beginning to change over the next 10 days to maybe even 2 weeks in the MDR, as these tropical waves, which continue to be strong moving off the coast of Africa, we're just continuing to get these strong tropical waves here. And as I've said before, I think as we progress further into the month, at least one of these strong tropical waves will break through and develop. So we will see whether or not that ends up actually happening. Going through the models here, though, starting off in the Western Pacific, just want to show you what's going to happen. And I mean, you can see how active it is. We obviously have Dolphin, which will continue to move on off to the west here, eventually make landfall in China as we get towards the end of the week. But just look at how much activity we have after it. I think this is Invest 96W. That very likely develops here as it moves to the northwest and maybe gets also close to Japan. But then there's something else that tries to develop, and a bunch of funky little pieces of vorticity here that the GFS has developing here in the Western Pacific. And at least over the next week, what is going to happen is we are literally going to have a monsoon trough set up across the entire tropical Pacific here. Basically this one massive gyre of just, a bunch of vorticity just strung out across the entire Pacific. And that's why the GFS is kind of going a little bit crazy here. But once it breaks down, this is probably going to lead to multiple named storms forming. So the Western Pacific is absolutely going to remain active for sure over the next few weeks, and probably get even more active here. And even going out to 2 weeks here, we have more stuff that forms. Looks like something that might get going in the South China Sea, and all very typical and all very expected thanks to the very strong El Nino we have out there. The Western Pacific through the month of August should be producing like a machine. The Eastern Pacific, and you're starting to see here some of these signals beginning to show up more on the models today. The GFS showing something developing here roughly around 5 or 6 days out, and then that's clearly at least one of the AOIs that the National Hurricane Center has, and then that generally continues. That generally will move on off to a west-northwest direction, like most of the storms here in the Eastern Pacific do, and hopefully stay away from Mexico. But looks like they're starting to see an increase in development as well, and probably an uptick, and maybe a quite decent uptick in activity instead of a lull like it seemed like a few days ago. So it looks like the East Pacific is actually going to start responding more to the El Nino that is in place after all, instead of being a dead basin. The Atlantic, though, will more than likely, while the GFS, keeps it quiet here for pretty much the entire model run here, but the ensembles, and now today, the European model, and actually some other models too, are starting to show something trying to spin up here in the MDR. And let me actually take you to the 0Z European here, and you can see once we get towards roughly around 9 to 10 days out, there you go. There's a tropical wave that moves off of Africa pretty aggressively, and then it seems like it finds favorable enough conditions here that it is able to successfully spin up. And then eventually, as this moves northward, away from the MDR and into the western Atlantic here, the European on the 0Z run actually strengthened this storm, and maybe even made it a hurricane just to the north of the islands. Not saying that that is going to happen, but I mean, this is definitely the first solid signal that we've seen here come out of the deep tropics in a long while. And sure, this is around 10 days out. You can't really buy something verbatim, especially 10 days out, but at least the European, it's not like the GFS that overdoes things with the vorticity and, very often has fantasy long-range hurricanes that, obviously don't come to pass. So we will see whether or not something is able to spin up here. And by the way, the ensembles, and I'm pretty sure you guys are been familiar with that, the ensembles have been showing MDR activity here and something trying to spin up as we get towards around mid-August for at least the last week or so, pretty much since the last week. So it's not like this signal here comes from nothing, but it is still far out, so we will be watching and we will be seeing whether or not the Atlantic might actually be trying to come alive within these next 2 weeks as we progress further and further into August. But either way, one thing is for sure, and that is El Nino will definitely continue to strengthen, and I think we are all but set to have a record event by the end of the year. With that being said, though, that's going to wrap it up for today's update. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, I would really appreciate if you like this video, comment any thoughts and questions you have below, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you can get videos like these, which will continue to come every single day from now all the way until the end of hurricane season. So if you like that, continue to stay tuned by subscribing, especially if you are new to the channel. And if you've already subscribed, well, continue to stay tuned because we have a lot more coming here over the next few weeks, obviously. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe. Peace, love, and kindness to you all. I will talk to you again tomorrow.